This video will explain the story of Avowed. We'll be going through the main story, the endings, and the choices made within them. We'll also be stopping every so often to talk about Obsidian's other RPG, Pillars of Eternity, as both this and Avowed are part of the same universe. Also, a huge spoiler warning for not just Avowed and its story, but also the end of Pillars of Eternity 2, as the next section discusses its ending to help contextualize the world. As always, like the video if you enjoy, and subscribe if you're new. If you like story-related content like this, whether that's explanation videos or retrospectives and analyses, then you're in the right place. The channel also has a Patreon, which you can support for any price you want via the link in the description. And so, without further ado, let's get started. So before we talk about Avowed and its story, we have to go back in time a bit to explain how we got here. As mentioned previously, Avowed is a spin-off of Obsidian's other RPG, Pillars of Eternity, as they both take place in the same world. If you're already familiar with Pillars lore or are simply not interested, you could skip ahead using the chapters on the timeline below. Although it may be worth sticking around as it could give you some extra context about what the world of these games is like and what happened in the Pillars games. Both Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 as well as Avowed take place in the world of Eora. Pillars of Eternity, or PoE for short, took place in the Deerwood, while its sequel was in the Deadfire Archipelago. Avowed, however, takes place in the Living Lands, a land that until now has not been seen in-game. The world of Eora is designed to be a typical fantasy setting, with a host of different races that inhabit its land. The more common ones you might be familiar with are humans, elves, and dwarves. They are markedly different when compared to other game adaptations of these races, but it should be kept in mind that there are many lands within Pillars of Eternity. So while humans are not unique, a human from the Adir Empire is a lot different when compared to one from the Living Lands. The customs and traditions of these lands are very different, so they will end up with two different lives. The two races unique to PoE though are the Amawa and the Orlan. The Amawan are notable for being semi-aquatic, living near oceans and such, while the Orlans are notable for being very small, while also sporting large ears and large coats of fur. Like before, there are many different kinds of Amawa and Orlan, so much so that it would be hard to catalog all them all, but that is the general overview of the two races. There is, however, a sixth race known as Godlike. Godlikes are not a specific race exactly, as they actually include all the 5 previous races. When a being from one of these 5 races is touched or blessed by a god, they grow features denoting that god. Sargemus in Avowed is very bright, so it's no wonder that his patron is Aethys, god of light and renewal. And just like before, there are tons of different godlikes, each with their own different features. These 6 races are known as Kith, which is a word often used to separate themselves from the creatures of Eora, as they too are also a race of creatures, but the Kith specifically are the 6 civilized races of Eora. All the beings of Eora though have souls. Eora's most important feature is the land's innate cycle of reincarnation. When a being dies, their soul goes to a place called the In-Between. These souls then wander this In-Between looking for the Adra Pillars. When the soul reaches this Adra Pillar, it then makes it to the Beyond, the place where not only the gods of Eora reside, but also the Wheel. The Wheel is a phenomenon that is presumably as old as time itself, and is what creates the reincarnation process. For many years, this is how things worked. Beings would die, their souls would go to the Wheel, and then they would reincarnate. However, that changed a little when a group of people tried to control its power. An ancient civilization known as the Angwithans existed thousands of years ago. They were a very prosperous group of people, as many of their technologies and buildings are still used today. Back in the day though, the Angwithans had worshipped many gods. Too many, in fact. This caused countless wars and schisms to prop up, which devastated their lands and their people. To end the bloodshed, they sought to find their true creators, only to find nothing. No gods existed, or if they did, they don't exist anymore. Fearing the consequences of such a monumental discovery, the Angwithans then decided that they would become the gods. They would use their advanced Adra tech to siphon the souls of their people to create these powerful gods. This is not known by anyone outside of a few important people, as most just know them as the gods of Eora. Each one was crafted based on specific ideals or concepts, like Barath, god of cycles and rebirth, or Mogren, goddess of fire. The ancient Angwithans also built a device that would control the Wheel. A device located in the city of Ukaizo controls the souls, moving these souls where the owners want them to go. This is important because the essence the souls leave behind is what the gods use to sustain themselves. That's what brings us to Pillars of Eternity 2. At the beginning of the game, the god Aethys took control of a statue underneath the stronghold you lived in the first game, with the intent of going to Ukaizo. He marched across the Deadfire Archipelago, killing thousands in the process, all to break the Wheel. Aethys was upset at the current state of the world. They wanted the people of the world to know the truth. Aethys wanted to show off the machines that they used to make them the gods. and he also wanted the Kith to worship or ignore them based on who they are, not what they pretend to be. Aethys believed that if the gods were successful, then the Kith would be ready to learn the truth about their gods, and if not, then they failed. This action also ends up forcing the other gods' hands, because everyone benefits from the wheel. The Kith need it for their souls, and the gods need the essence of the souls to stay powerful. Without the wheel, none of this could be possible. As Aethys says, we either fail together or move forward together. At the end of PoE 2, regardless of your decisions, Aethys will break the wheel. Avowed notably takes place a couple of years after PoE 2, so we are living in a post-broken wheel Eora, but it's not as bad as it seems. Yet. As mentioned by some of the devs behind the game, the ramifications of Aethys' decisions will bear fruit over a couple of generations, not a couple of years, so we aren't approaching the point of no return just yet. We can see this for ourselves in-game. Word does not exactly travel fast in Eora. Most people know that Aethys stomped across the Deadfire, but they aren't aware of the wheel's current state just yet. This is likely designed this way so Pillars of Eternity 3 could eventually tackle that problem. However, what we do know is that in between games, it was discovered that many of Eora's godlikes have mysteriously died. In PoE 2, it's revealed that the gods can use the godlikes they touched as another form of sustenance. Instead of taking the essence from souls that pass through the wheel, they could just take them from the godlikes. Given that the wheel was just broken, leaving the gods without a proper food source, they all took to calling back their godlikes, so to speak, using their essence as power, but killing them all in the process. Nowadays, it's rare to see a godlike of any kind walking the streets. This is the current state of Eora by the time we get to Avowed. Again, most of this means nothing in regards to Avowed's plot as it's rather self-contained, but I felt that a quick history lesson was necessary to catch you up to speed on the current world state. As for Avowed, we play as an Adiran envoy hailing from the Adir Empire. We are also born godlike, although strangely no one knows who our god is, as our added features are extremely unique. So a godlike who survived the culling, touched by a god no one knows. A rarity among rarities to be sure. The Emperor sent us on a mission to the Living Lands to secure a future for the Adir Empire. Something is growing in the Living Lands called the Dream Scourge, which threatens the Empire and its people. So we are to find out what that is and put a stop to it, lest the Adir Empire loses all the progress it made establishing a foothold in the region. When our ship comes close to port, we are shot by those of the fortress and are washed ashore. This is rather strange as this was supposed to be our people, so they have no reason to shoot at us. Looking through the wreckage, we can see that just about everyone has died, but there are no signs of a war, at least amongst other factions. The only surviving member is Stedman Ralk, who is infected with this Dream Scourge, showing not just fungal infections across his face, but fungal infections that look uncomfortably like the ones we also sport. After putting the man out of his misery, the envoy hears a strange voice in their head, calling them towards the Audra Pillar. Nothing comes of the conversation, but it is certainly not what they expected when arriving here. Eventually, the envoy and their friend Garrick will finally make it to their first destination, Paradise, the only Adiran outpost on the island. This is also where the envoy will pick up their first companion, an Amauan named Kai. The envoy was told to report to the ambassador, but both the ambassador and the Claviger are missing. Working together, the two track their location to a cave. The Claviger was sadly killed in the attack against the bear inflicted with the Dream Scourge, while the ambassador is still alive hiding in the cave. Once it's down, the voice beckons the envoy to touch the pillar again. It talks to them more personally, although its identity is still unknown. The voice claims to be able to help the envoy in fulfilling their goal of stopping the Dream Scourge. They just need to trust it. The envoy is then encouraged to share their findings with Inquisitor Ludwin, leader of the Steel Garrote. But the ambassador and the Inquisitor aren't on good terms. Both are working together for Adir, one of diplomacy and one of security, but they each have different views and priorities, which causes frequent conflicts. The ambassador cares about the Dream Scourge and its threat to the Empire, while the Inquisitor is only interested in conquering lands and taking care of Oathbreakers and rebels that threaten Adir's rule. When heading into the city to meet with her, the envoy is struck by a poisonous arrow, killing them on the spot, although thanks to the voice in their head they survive as it revives them shortly after. It's clear that the soul of the envoy is a lot different when compared to the common everyday citizen of Eora, so Liviana, a healer at the clinic, recommends they see a Watcher. Earlier I mentioned how people of Eora have souls. Watchers can see those souls. They can glimpse into a person's past life and communicate with lost souls that wander the land. In a way, it's not far from, say, a medium, someone who claims to be able to speak to spirits. The protagonist of Pillars of Eternity is also notably a Watcher. The Watcher then communes with the envoy's soul. Fortunately, their soul is strong and healthy, although she was unable to figure out what the voice is. The group then leaves it at that for now, and the envoy returns to the ambassador. He wants to find this assassin and make an example of him. Kai suggests reaching out to a friend of his named Marius, a dwarf from Galawain's Tusks who lives off the land, and is also our second companion. Through their investigation, they managed to track down the killer in an underground sewer system. He said that he tried to kill the envoy because he is a symptom of the problems here in Paradise. See, the Living Lands is known for being a frontier. Kai explains that many people don't come here willingly due to its hostility, but many people are here though because they enjoy the freedom or just to get a second chance at life. Unlike the Adiran Empire, which is ruled over by an emperor, the Living Lands is sectioned off, ruled by the leaders of the respective locations. Temerity leads the people of Thirdborn, while Vidara leads his people in Fior. No central government or leader is linking these two places together. As such, it's very lax, but also a quite lawless place. This is why the presence of the Adir Empire troubles those of the Living Lands, as they want to introduce laws, governments, and mayors to their cities. Basically, they want to put laws in places that have historically never had them, so it's no secret that most people here don't like the Adir Empire and the Envoy. The people of Paradise have a specific hatred towards the Adir Empire though, as they've taken over their city. Most places like Thirdborn and Fior are visited by couriers and patrols of Adir, but Paradise has already been overtaken. Many Adirans settled here and then bought out the Paradisians, leaving them homeless or poor in their own city. Paradise itself is sectioned off into many districts, with the more structured and organized ones sitting right next to the lawless ones. All while the shanty town just outside the city's borders houses the poor folk who were run out of the city. It's caused some major tensions between the original settlers and the new colonists of Adir, which has boiled over to the envoy's assassination, as the rebels believe that they represent a part of the problem. This leads to the major choice of the area. Each section in Avowed is capped off with a decision that will change the respective land going forward. To keep it simple, I'll save the long-term consequences for the ending section and just focus on the short-term for now. The choices here are pretty simple: kill or spare. You can kill the assassin, believing that they may strike again if not dealt with, or spare them, recognizing that they didn't have a specific hatred towards you personally, they were just lashing out at the Empire for ruining their land. You can also force him to confess his crimes to the Steel Garrote, which will get him killed. Whatever you decide, the envoy will return back to the ambassador with the result of their decision. Amid the conversation, the often talked about Inquisitor Ludwin finally makes an appearance. Inquisitor Ludwin is quite fascinating, because they're actually dead. Ludwin fell in battle a couple of years ago in the Deadfire Archipelago, however they were revived as a Death Guard. Death Guards are individuals who don't pass on after death due to their extreme determination. They are, however, bound by this determination, but so long as they have it, they can continue to be revived, as is plainly seen with her throughout the game. Inquisitor Ludwin is driven by her devotion to Wodika. Wodika is really the only god of importance in regards to Avowed's main story. When the Ingwithan created their gods, they designed Wodika to be the strongest of them, ruling over the Pantheon. This didn't really sit well with the other gods, so they conspired against her, vanquishing her and taking away some of her power. Wodika is a god, so obviously she's not dead, but she lost considerable amounts of power because of it. Oddly enough though, Ludwin's state of being as a Death Guard is likely a direct result of the Watcher's actions in Pillars of Eternity 2. While traveling through the capital city of Nekataka, you may stumble upon a woman named Khan in the Wild Mare. She asks the Watcher to find a man named Oswald as he owes her money. The Watcher tracks his location to the Oathbinder's sanctum. At the bottom is both Oswald and Ludwin. She claims that Oswald broke an oath, so she is here to kill him. The Watcher, however, can step in and stop this, which forces a fight with Ludwin, ending with her death. Given she died a few years ago in Deadfire, and PoE 2 happened a few years ago and takes place in Deadfire, it's heavily implied that the Watcher was the one who killed her, only to be reborn as a Death Guard. Either way, our journey with Paradise is done, as the ambassador instructs the envoy to head to the Emerald Stair. The people of Fior, a city within Emerald Stair, are known to house many animancers, so their knowledge might be helpful in pinning down this dream scourge. Animancy is the study of souls and their essence, using machines and technology to study souls and answer questions about them. Animancy is quite controversial, as just as many people see its benefits as those that despise its existence. Depending on where you go in Eora, you will get vastly different reactions to the study. The Adir Empire views animancy with the same hatred as the Circle does blood magic in Dragon Age. The studying of the soul is too dangerous and honestly in some ways sacrilegious, as it goes against the natural flows of the world's souls. As such, animancy is banned within the Adir Empire, which explains why a lawless place like the Living Lands not only houses many animancers, but also why they're immediately put off by anyone representing the Adir Empire. Upon arriving to Fior, we can see the animancers have already taken to trying to improve the crop yield within Fior, as machines have been placed all around the soil. The Dream Scourge is ruining the crops, so the animancers have to try and come up with more scientific methods of harvesting, although they've had little success with it. The leader of Fior is Vidaro, who's currently struggling with some of the locals, mainly Giada. She wants to use Animancy to help discover and cure the Dream Scourge. Vidaro believes the Dream Scourge is a myth and also doesn't see the beauty of Animancy either. The two of them cannot reach a common ground as Giada wants to continue her research into the Dream Scourge, but all experiments must go through Vidaro, who won't let her pursue this lead. So Vidaro exiles Giada from Fior, asking her to pack her things and go. She is furious with the decision, but does recognize at least that she could study the Dream Scourge on her own, which is when the party offers her a place amongst the crew, giving us our third companion. Before the group gets to work, she asks the envoy to help out some of her fellow Animancers. She'll be doing them a favor, so they'll have to do one for her in return, which will help them with her investigation into the Dream Scourge. With everything set to go, the group then heads to Nadu Tedek, an ancient ruin that used to belong to an ancient civilization known as the Godless. Once they make it to the Yadra Pillar, the envoy talks with the voice again, and now they finally get to learn who's been in their head. The voice is a god known as Sapadal. Sapadal was created independently from the other gods. The living land shares a weird relationship with its Adra. Adra sources all across the Eora are connected. No matter if it's the Deadfire, Deerwood, or Adir, all the Adra flows through itself across the world, except in the living lands. All the Adra here flows amongst itself. They are cut off from the rest. Both Giada and Quilichi here believe that Adra in the living lands is like a terrarium for their souls. They believe that the essence of living beings' souls could have accumulated for years within the Beyond, and eventually gave birth to Sapadal due to its immense power. This makes Sapadal not only the only god to not come from the Engwithan lineage, but ironically makes them the only actual god, not one manufactured like the current pantheon. This would also explain the envoy's rare godlike features, as their god is Sapadal. From their conversation, Sapadal reveals that they used to be worshipped by the Godless. I know that's kind of an ironic name now, but Yatzli, a future companion, will explain that murals of the Godless depicted him as having strong hatred for the current pantheon. Coupled with the fact that no one but the Godless knew of Sapadal's existence until now, it kinda makes sense why many people of the modern day just assume them to be atheists. Sapadal also mentions that they are currently trapped and imprisoned inside a place called the Garden. They recommend finding the Tabaro Senakis for more answers regarding the fate of Sapadal and the Godless. Once the conversation is over, the envoy explains what they just saw, only for something to happen to Fior while they're gone. Upon exiting the temple, the city of Fior could be seen burning to the ground. The Steel Garrote, along with Ludwin, were, as they say, hastening the inevitable. Animancy and wild vegetation and animals could prove a problem for Paradis, so Ludwin snuffed them out before it got out of hand. From here, you have both a choice to make and an outcome that was already made without you noticing. Ludwin and her Steel Garrote attacked the town and burned it to the ground. If nothing is done, then the damage is severe, which will affect the ending. However, in Emerald Stair, there is a random side quest regarding a possible traitor within the Fior military. Tracking the lead down has you confronting Ranger Dorso. She believed that Fior cannot survive without the Empire's help, so she tried to help Ludwin and the Steel Garrote. Through this conversation, she will mention that the Steel Garrote is located in a cave not too far from where you both are. If you go inside and kill the soldiers of the army, they will not be nearly as successful when they raid Fior. It will still be enough damage to force the people of Fior to relocate, but not nearly enough to completely destroy it, which changes the ending. The next choice then is what to do with the refugees of Fior. Vidaro recommends Paradis. Adir hates Animancy, but he believes it's best to hide under their noses, as they would never expect their enemies to be within their borders. Quilichi, on the other hand, thinks it's too dangerous, and recommends going to Thirdborn. The location is quite rough and not forgiving, but it would allow them to practice Animancy without any issue, and their skills as Animancers could help soften them up to accepting a large batch of refugees. Regardless of what you choose, the envoy has their next destination. The Tabaro Senakis are out there somewhere. Thankfully, Yatzli, an expert on the Godless, knows where they might be, another ruin named Naku Kubel in Shatterscarp. The envoy will need to hurry though, as Yatzli's research was stolen during the attack on Fior, and she suspects this is because Ludwin is also trying to find the garden and kill Sapadal. Upon arrival, we can see that the town is already under attack by a Dream Thrall, beings who were infected by the Dream Scourge. Once they make it inside, the envoy talks to Temerti, leader of Thirdborn. They present a missive they received earlier from the Steel Garrote before entering Shatterscarp, which says that if she doesn't give up Naku Kubel, then the Thirdborn will suffer the wrath of the Steel Garrote. She has no plans to give it up, but even if she did, she can't, as the place is being blocked by a barrier placed by Archmage Ringram, so she's the one to talk to. Ringram will have the party dispel her illusions, listen to a parable, and fight off hordes of skeletons before even considering a conversation. Through their talk, she learns of Sapadal, which was the missing piece in her study on the Dream Scourge, and she lets the party destroy the barrier as the envoy is the key to unlocking the ruin's secrets. Entering the ruin, the envoy is greeted by a few Tabarosanakis. In their language, Tabarosanakis is basically another term for godlike, which would explain these similar plant-like growths. They require a test to make sure the envoy is ready to see Soppadal. This puzzles Soppadal though. Why would they not help the envoy, someone who is clearly touched by Soppadal and can free them? Surely there's a way to fast-track the initiation process given the circumstances, right? Well, as the party learns, the Tabarosanakis have no intention of freeing Soppadal. They instead believe that they should be prisoned, as letting them loose will cause another calamity. This is where it's kind of hinted at before it's outright confirmed later that Soppadal is the cause of the Dream Scourge. The fungal plants that appear from the Dream Scourge, the ones that look like the envoy's features, are no mere coincidence. Another clue to this mystery was the fact that those infected with the Dream Scourge seem to speak in poetry, and Soppadal notably speaks like this quite frequently. Basically, when Soppadal first came into being, they found love amongst the godless. Both Soppadal and the godless protected each other. However, at some point in time, the gods learned of Soppadal's existence and immediately put a stop to it. Boudica specifically imprisoned them in the garden and used her magfolk to destroy their people and their history. Boudica wanted no trace of the godless to remain, because any shred of evidence could lead to Soppadal's discovery. So one night an army of magfolk came by and destroyed the lands of the godless. Soppadal tried to protect them, but she wasn't powerful enough. In a fit of rage, she lashed out in agony, which caused all kinds of calamities. There is a common belief in our world that terrible weather and natural disasters are signs that Mother Nature is angry at us. This is exactly what this was. Their pain caused thunderstorms, floods, and fires to erupt, which inadvertently killed the godless. That's why the Tabarosanakis don't want them freed, as it would risk them getting too emotional, essentially causing another calamity. This conversation may also make you hesitant towards Soppadal, given they mentioned earlier how they would be willing to help the envoy destroy the Dream Scourge, even though they didn't reveal that they were the one who caused it. However, in their defense, they do state that their memory is fragmented and not all there. Had their memories not been corrupted, they would have not accidentally deceived the envoy for this long. The conversation is then cut short as Soppadal is frightened by a presence that they feel is close by. This presence is, of course, Inquisitor Ludwin. Once more, we have to make a choice. Ludwin wants to destroy the ruins. There's an army of dream thralls here, and the roots of the Dream Scourge spread across it, and she wants to wipe it out. Ringgrim, however, recognizes that this is only a temporary solution and that they should instead cut it off from the root at the source. She could sever the connection of the Adra in this region, cutting it off from the living lands but destroying all the Dream Scourge in Shatterscarp. It won't cure those already infected, but it will stop new ones from becoming infected. This will, however, require lots of magical essence, and thus many people within Shatterscarp will have to die to make this happen. It's also not voluntary either, it's a lottery, and our crew and the people we care about might even be included. Both choices are reflected in the end slides, but you can also see the immediate effects of this decision. Siding with Ringgrim means hundreds of people will die in the process. A few dozen of them live in Thirdborn. The town is already working to bury and honor their dead, while Temerity is furious with the envoy's decision. You'll also occasionally stumble across the random bodies strewn about Shatterscarp, all victims of the spell. If you side with Ludwin though, the Dream Scourge from the ruins may be gone, but it's not left Shatterscarp. Thirdborn is budding with flowers and fungus. Guards, citizens, even Temerity are feeling the effects of the Dream Scourge, and the other areas outside the town are growing fungus in places that didn't have them before. Once again though, this choice then takes us to our next location. In the ruins of Naku Kubel was a map that pointed to Galawain's Tusk, the home of the Living Land's Pargrunan dwarves. Following the road takes the party to a destroyed bridge that was supposed to take them to the garden. With no direct path forward, they then head to Solace Keep in search of answers. Taking an elevator, they meet with the council members Mihala and Kostya. Both are polar opposites in terms of their views on the keep and dwarven law. Mihala is a traditionalist. It said that no one is allowed to leave Solace Keep under any circumstances, and she holds firm in that belief. She follows the word of Nandru, their founder, to the letter, and makes sure the keep and the garden are safe. Kostya thinks she's stuck in her ways, believing that his people could have a chance to thrive if they were only given a chance to leave, even willing to sell the keep to Adir in exchange for gold. Unfortunately, neither of them is willing to part with the location of the entrance to the garden, so the party is on its own. Eventually, they track down Ludwin and her steel garrote to the mines of Mount Forja. All of them, including Captain Elfir, who we've met a few times already, are infected with the Dream Scourge. On a table inside the mines is a map with Solace Keep circled many times, implying that the entrance is not only inside the keep, but that someone, Kostya, gave them this information. Making it to the summit, Ludwin and her knights are busy arguing with the leftover wardens that the steel garrote didn't kill. Ludwin plants a flag on the summit, not only claiming the territory for the steel garrote, but also saying that the living lands will unite under one banner, one people, one god, and one law. Soppadal, absolutely pissed at what they just heard, loses their cool and shouts, causing a massive explosion to occur, which infects the soldiers nearby, turning them into dream thralls. This is exactly what the Tabaro Senakis were worried about. Once the dream thralls have been cleared out, the envoy then talks to Ludwin. This doesn't result in any endgame changes, but you can avoid a potential confrontation with her if you curried enough favor with her throughout the game. Ludwin believes that the envoy is not making decisions of their own volition, rather Sapadal is controlling them. She then runs through her own assessment of the previous areas. If you sided with Ludwin enough times, killing your assassin, not discovering the steel garrote in the cave, and choosing her over Ringram, then she believes your statement that Sapadal has no control over you. She will then ask the envoy to not mess this up, and to make sure they kill Sapadal instead of letting them go free. If you didn't side with her enough by doing the opposite of these decisions, Ludwin will fight you atop this summit. The envoy will come out victorious, but as you'll recall, she's a death guard, so she'll be back. The party then travels back to Solace Keep, asking once again for the entrance, now that they know it's inside the keep. However, something has gone wrong. Sapadal's scream activated the recently dormant volcano, causing the lava in the keep to rise, which will, with enough time, destroy the keep. They do have measures in place to stop this, but they haven't used them in ages, so they're evacuating just in case. Plus, Kostya was the one who offered to go down there and activate the sluice gates, and as we know, Kostya doesn't want his people in the keep, so it's very likely that he will go back on his word and let the keep be destroyed. Once again, we have to make a choice. We can either side with Mihala, stopping Kostya and activating the gears to save the keep, or work with Kostya to destroy the keep, leaving the dwarven people without a home, but with the potential to finally live outside their walls. Whoever you choose comes to lead the people of Solace Keep afterward. There is also a third option, which is killing Kostya but then letting the keep be destroyed. This would mean that Kostya's plan succeeds, but he won't be there to lead his people, forcing Mihala to do it instead, which in itself is another ending. While making their way through the underground passages of the keep, the party will come across the soul of Nandru, who is confined to an Adra pillar. Having also been touched by Sapadal in the past, Nandru has an immediate level of respect for the envoy, and entrusts him to uphold his mission. He wants the envoy to kill Sapadal. Scattered across the land are various ancient memories. Nandru wants the envoy to find them, just to see how dangerous Sapadal really is. These ancient memories show past figures of the godless and how they were betrayed by Sapadal. Kishimal and Hekala, Namana, and Maru, all of whom had their civilizations attacked by Sapadal due to their uncontrollable emotions. Something as simple as one man destroying a tree caused Sapadal to destroy the entire village. Interestingly, Sapadal refers to these individuals as you, implying that these are the past lives of the envoy. It's unclear how long ago these memories were or the gaps in between said memories. But it is interesting that through all the different incarnations the envoy's soul had, they happen to be tethered to Sapadal 5 separate times, 4 times as the godless, and now here is the envoy. This is likely why you get to make the decisions during these memories. Sapadal has gaps in their memories, so they need the envoy's help to fill them, so you can create the story of your past lives. This is supposed to help you make an informed decision regarding Sapadal's fate. This proves that Sapadal time and time again has ruined the people's lands that worship them. However, being in prison provides a unique perspective on life, so this may have changed their tune. You could also use this as a reason to release them, because your bond with Sapadal spans multiple lifetimes, so the two of you have a close connection with one another. And you should probably figure out where you stand on Sapadal's actions, because you're going to have to make that choice very soon, as once the issue of the keep is resolved, it's on to the garden, and past the point of no return. The entire level though is long, and filled with mostly combat until we reach Sapadal, although there are a few sections here dedicated to our companions. So seeing as I've largely ignored them, let's talk about the 4 people who joined the envoy on their journey. The first one we met was Kai back in Paradise. Kai, like most of Maua, was from Rawatai. The place is notably very hard to live in due to the constant storms, so they usually roam the other lands when they can. He came to the Living Lands around 6 years ago. He joined the Aomauan Navy when they were trying to make a foothold in the Deadfire. The Huana, who had already settled there and are more like their distant cousins, didn't exactly take too kindly to their presence, so they fought quite a bit. Kai began to question how war was going to help feed his people back home, so he left. He deserted the Navy and then bounced between different mercenary groups until he ended up here. When entering Emerald Stair for the first time, Kai asked if the envoy could go with him to his friend's cabin. Kai had a friend named Tama, but it's clear their bond was pretty deep. Tama had a painting of Kai in his room that he made before he passed away, and also left him a whale carving, identical to the one on Kai's chest. Kai carved that for him such a long time ago that he's surprised to even see it. It's clear Tama loved him, but Kai is confused as to why he held this info from him, given they were so close to each other. The envoy points out though that he could have shown this in other ways, as it seems like Tama was a good listener. Kai explains however that this can't be true because Tama was just always like that. He would always make time for him and knew what to say, whether those were heartfelt words or a blunt reality check. and he also knew when to calm him down when things from his past crept up, which is when the light bulb flicks. Tama really did care for him, much deeper than Kai ever thought. When arriving in Shatterscarp, Kai explains the full story between the two. Tama was in charge of a patrol which included a few others along with Kai. During the patrol, they were ambushed and he was hit during the fight. He managed to make it back to Thirdborn, but it was clear that Tama wasn't going to recover. Kai had noticed while watching Tama slowly lose more and more life that his badge was missing, something he never took off. He used this as an excuse to leave, saying that he would be right back once he returned with the badge, despite Tama wanting him to be by his side, because Kai knew he wouldn't be able to stomach the loss. He left not only Tama behind, but all of Thirdborn, as he never returned to the town again, not until we showed up with him a few moments ago. Kai seems to have a kind of defensive mechanism built into him, because whenever he's reminded of this, he seems to distance himself from people. He tells the envoy that while he's a good fighter, that's all he is. He lets people down all the time, especially when they're counting on him, and it seems like he doesn't want to do that again. This trip to Tama's grave does at least make him reconsider his life a bit. And depending on what you say, Kai vows to change the direction of his life going forward. And then to cap it all off, we have one more meeting in the garden. During our trip to the garden, each of the companions will experience a deeply personal moment to them. For Kai, it's Tama's death. Walking through these moments with the companions will allow them to reconcile with their past or help them make a decision. For Kai, it allows him to move on. When he thought of Tama, it was always his worst moment, when he was on his deathbed, but he realized that there's a lot more to Tama than he believed, to the point where this Tama on the bed feels alien now. He now recognizes that Tama is more than what his mind believed, and by realizing that he's able to move on, knowing that his regret does not define him. The next companion we met is Marius. Marius used to live in Solace Keep, but left when he got older, which you'll recall is forbidden. Like Kai, he never returned to the place he left until we came along. Marius is rather reserved when it comes to his past, and that's for good reason. When you arrive at the keep, he starts to feel very stressed. It's hard for him to breathe and collect his thoughts, and he makes up all kinds of excuses just so that he doesn't have to go inside. He also starts seeing visions of a village somewhere in the Tusks. He's not sure if it's a hallucination or a premonition, but he believes it to be important somehow. This is because Marius' mind has purposely withheld moments from his past because of the trauma he endured. Marius lived in a village outside the keep, which was led by a man named Razvan. The guy was a religious zealot, and the way Marius describes him makes him sound like a cult leader. This is evident by how Razvan believed that he could transcend his people and make them into ascended beings, but to do so, everyone needed to kill themselves. Marius, still a young boy at this point, had no idea what was happening, but thanks to his friend Inaku who carried him to the keep, he was able to survive. The events that transpired there were wiped from history, and no one was allowed to speak about what happened. This confused Marius throughout his adult life, which is what drove him to leaving Solace Keep, as when he asked about his past or his parents, no one would tell him. He says that it felt like everyone knew something he didn't and refused to tell him, which was exactly the case. Returning to his old home after all these years doesn't exactly bring back any good memories, especially when he finds Inaku still alive, but notably affected by the Dream Scourge. Marius then requests that they track down Razvan before he hurts more people. Razvan is seemingly a watcher, as he can commune with the souls, but the voices of them drove him mad. Further saying that he can scream and quiet the voices in his head, but only for a time. Now he just sits in a cave with dream thralls, believing them to be deeply connected to the land. The ideal scenario, it seems, for his ascended beings. He is a shell of his former self, which is why Marius refuses to kill him, believing that a swift death is not enough punishment, although you can actually choose to kill him if you want to. If you refuse to kill him, then for the first time, Marius feels at peace. He finally learned what happened in his past, and why it always felt like something was missing within him. The only thing he couldn't do is reconcile with Inaku due to the Dream Scourge, but when inside the garden, he can have one last chat with him. Inaku tells him that it's time to live his life. He's alive, yes, but he's mainly been surviving it. Now, it's actually time to live it. Our third companion was Giada when we visited the town of Eora. As described before, she is an animancer, and she got that from her parents, who also took up the same profession. During our talk with Vidaro, he briefly mentions an incident involving a basement. Giada is shocked to hear this being used against her, so it's clearly something that bothers her. When rounding up the other animancer, she asks if you could go get the phantasmal focus from the basement. She would get it herself, but she's not comfortable going down there just yet. Notes and journals around the area point to her parents performing some kind of experiment that would cost them their lives. They turned into these tree-like beings still stuck here in the same place they died. Outside of it being incredibly traumatic, this became a driving motivator for her as she wants to complete her parents' work and achieve what they could not. Throughout the journey, though, she comes to question her career. She thought she had all the answers, but the living lands has proved time and time again that she is wrong. She is no closer to finishing her parents' work now than when she was when she first met us, and that troubles her. Making it to the garden, she is greeted by the same bodies of her parents that we saw in the basement. The Green Whisperers then talk to Giada about what happened. Giada's parents had managed to find Sopodal during their experiment. Having been in prison for possibly hundreds of years, Sopodal immediately tried to communicate with them as it was their first connection they made in such a long time. But when a god speaks, the world trembles. This caused her parents to turn into those tree-like beings. Sopodal wanted to be heard by the people of the living lands, but in doing so twisted her parents' body and soul. These Whisperers were like Giada's parents, victims of a similar event. But the question is, why these tree things specifically? Well, the correct term is animat, a spirit bound to unliving vessels. A good example would be a vessel or skeleton that guards a royal tomb that you'll fight when you walk into a dungeon. But because they were made from Sopodal's mind and memories, they take on a naturally look to them. They were to serve as their companions, toys, diversions. Imaginary friends, basically. Sopodal was alone, trapped in a dimension with no one to speak to. They just wanted someone to play with and someone to speak to, so they fashioned people into trees so that they could have some company. But the real question remains, why is the garden showing this to her? The Whisperers are here to apologize on behalf of Sopodal, and we can choose to let Giada decide whether Sopodal deserves forgiveness, or we can encourage her to choose what we believe Sopodal deserves. The future of Giada's life, though, still remains undecided. She wants to pursue animancy, but she's also concerned about her skills and purpose. You can either encourage her to take up animancy again, letting her pursue her career without her parents' input, meaning she will decide what animancy means to her, rather than doing it to complete her parents' work, or she can give it up completely, fully removing the burden of doing animancy, because she felt that she needed to go down this career path because of her parents, and now no longer needs to. The final companion to join us was Yatzli. As mentioned before, Yatzli is the foremost expert on the godless, or the Akita as they're officially called. She, like Giada, lived in the town of Eora with her husband Quilichi. It's learned very quickly that Yatzli is extremely talented, and her talents have given her far too many avenues to pursue. Initially joining the party when they went to investigate the appearance of Archmage Ringram, by the end, Ringram takes a liking to her. She gives Yatzli her grimoire and will even offer her an apprenticeship after all this is said and done. It's a pretty rare opportunity, something any mage would kill to have presented to them. Already she was reeling over the decision because more time with Ringram means less time with Quilichi, but this was made worse by her trip to the garden. Yatzli has been having near constant dreams of a library. It's filled with books and tablets galore, only for a being to appear in the distance and then the sound of a loud scream which wakes her up. She's seen this dream hundreds of times, but is nowhere close to figuring out its meaning. Upon arriving at the garden, Yatzli finds the library, just as she remembered it in her dream, only to be greeted by her. The figure that was watching over her in the dream was the librarian. As mentioned before, the godless were attacked by the magfolk of Wodica. When all that was going down, the librarian shut herself in her room and began cataloging their history so they would not be forgotten, only to drink poison shortly after, not giving Wodica the satisfaction. This librarian is unnamed, but she's learned to be a past incarnation of Yatzli. Like the envoy, she too was a godless in their past life, which would explain why she has always been obsessed with the godless and their ruins. This has now added more food to her plate than she can handle. The librarian tells her that she needs to replace her and keep her people's history alive, as there will not be another librarian. It's either her, or the history of the godless is gone forever. So Yatzli has to make a decision: stay in Fior and keep doing what she's been doing, train with Ringram and become one of the Living Lands' best mages, or record the history of the godless, lest they be forgotten. As explained by Inaku, Sopodal is showing the party these memories because they're trying to take steps to better understand the envoy's party. But like with everything else, it's meant to give you more information to chew on, to weigh upon the scales, as the envoy must decide what to do with Sopodal. The Dream Scourge will be cured either way, it's just a matter of whether Sopodal deserves a second chance. We've seen them destroy civilizations, but we've also seen them at their weakest, fearful of Wodica, the demise of their people, and the worry that they might be alone forever simply because of their unique existence. When confronting Sopodal, you could choose to either kill or free them. Despite meaning the end of their life, they do not fight it. They'd rather be free from prison or freed from the shackles of life. Either is preferable. But the envoy can question these binary decisions, questioning if this is truly the only way. Sopodal then suggests that the envoy merges with them. They will become one. Sopodal will be free from their prison, but the envoy will be controlled by them. There is a conversation that backs this up at the very end of the game, where you're forced to choose what Sopodal wants you to say in this moment. So you've given them their freedom, but at the loss of your own. Although maybe you prefer that. Sopodal even says that they will no longer need to worry or think about their purpose or direction in life, as Sopodal can put them on the path for them. Regardless of which option you choose, each one sends you through a portal and back to Paradise. Due to the weird time difference in the garden, we learn that it's been weeks since we last entered. during which Ludwin and her Steel Garrote have taken to attack in the city. Where we teleported to was a camp just outside the walls. The sick, dying, and the ready are all stationed here, either preparing for war or recovering from it. Some of the smaller quests you've completed will show themselves in this last area. For instance, Elder Gregory will be here if you complete the book burning quest in the Tusks. He's sure to record the events of the battle regardless of the outcome, as it is surely to be one for the history books. Giliana, a courtesan from Paradis, will also be inside the city and give you a key that lets you take an alternate route if you complete her quest. Even Ranger Dorso from Fior is here. You can choose to kill her, but if you tell her to exile herself from Fior, she comes back as an enemy fighting for the Steel Garrote. These kinds of things pepper the whole area, but there is also the big final decision, and that's what you will choose for the Living Lands. Assembled near the gate are the leaders of the cities and towns you visited along the way, although you may have different leaders than I. When asked where to take the refugees of Fior, siding with whoever, either Vidar or Kralichi, makes them the leader of their people. The same goes for Kostya and Mihala. Timerti will represent Thirdborn if you side with Ringgrim, with Rutaska replacing her if you side with Ludwin, as Timerti is still mumbling to herself in her office thanks to the Dream Scourge. The ambassador then offers us a choice, our final choice. What will the Living Lands become? There are technically 6 routes this can go, which equate to 5 unique endings. The first is to turn the Living Lands into another part of the Adir Empire. The Living Lands would operate like Paradis, a central government, laws, mayors, etc. You could also go the opposite way and unify the Living Lands. This is what the Living Lands was originally before the Adir Empire came. So this would look like every other place outside Paradis, places like Thirdborn or Fior, places that keep to themselves and survive on their own without a central government. The Adir Empire will also retreat and leave the Living Lands alone. If neither of these sounds acceptable, you could also suggest a compromise and institute a grave room. The Living Lands would retain its own laws under a grave, appointed by the Emperor of the Empire. The grave would divide the Living Lands into administrative districts, with mayors being elected to serve as the voices for those districts. The island would also be expected to provide resources and taxes to the Empire, and even soldiers if there was a war happening. But the Living Lands would be able to enter the Empire's sphere of influence. If they were ever invaded, the Empire would step in and stop them. The grave of this island is also assumed to be the Envoy, as they are a capable soldier who survived the Living Lands and are much more familiar with its people. If you really don't want to decide though, you can ask the leaders to choose and hold it to a vote. Each leader has their own feelings on the matter. Mihala, for instance, would prefer a unified Living Lands away from Adir, while Kostya is more than willing to accept Adir's influence. So the rulers of the lands do play a key role in determining which ending is picked. It doesn't result in a new ending, it's just an alternate way of getting one of the 3 previous ones. All of these endings function the same when it comes to the final battle. The party fights their way through the city only to come face to face with Ludwin. Killing her requires you to break her faith, meaning you either fight her 4 separate times, with her getting weaker by the 4th until Wodika loses favor in her and she actually dies, or you select the correct options and have high enough stats and you can talk her to death, convincing her that her faith is wavering, which kills her on the spot. The only ending that doesn't abide by this route is the 4th option, which is where the envoy at the 11th hour can declare their allegiance to the Steel Garrote. Naturally, everyone is shocked, so much so that the leaders will tell you to piss off and your companions will even abandon you, forcing you to do the final battle on your own. Instead of the Steel Garrote, the envoy will have to fight the Paradis rebels. When making it to Ludwin, she recognizes your change in attitude and welcomes you to the team. However, you must renounce Sopadal and kneel before her. If you do, she'll kill you. Ludwin back in Shatterscarp called the envoy the offspring of the Dream Scourge, referring to how Sopadal blessed them with their power. Ludwin does not care what it touches. Anything related to Sopadal must be destroyed, including the envoy. She will always attack you in this ending as there is no way to join her. But instead of kneeling, if you instead attack, asking her to kneel, then the 2 of you will square off. If you win, then you take her place, becoming the leader of the Steel Garrote. With that over with, we can now talk about the results of these decisions. Before we begin though, I do want to make clear that I may not have every ending in Avowed. It's an Obsidian title after all, so there are dozens of choices, and even the possibility of a small side quest being included here as well. I'd like to believe that I got all of them, but just in case I happen to miss any, let me know in the comments down below. I'll make an update and pin it in the comments if it's particularly important, like a main ending. Regardless, there are quite a few of them, and this is likely to get very confusing, so let's take this as slowly as possible. The first few slides are defaulted to every player, as they discuss the journey and the result of the battle. When it mentions the Dream Scourge, the next slide will discuss what you decided to do. The people of the Living Lands want to know what it was. If you freed Sopadal or killed them, then you will tell them the truth. That Sopadal was the one who released it, and that you either quelled it, leaving them at peace, or you stamped out the threat and killed them. Either way, the threat is gone. Interestingly, this slide does not exist if you merge with Soppadal, implying that Soppadal's control over the Envoy forced them to not reveal the secrets of the Dream Scourge, likely so that no one comes after them and attempts to hurt them again. Then comes the civilizations of the island. First, let's talk about the city of Paradise, specifically if you killed your assassin. Under Adir, the rebels are hunted and killed because of their actions, until they either flee the city or die trying to get it back. The same also goes for the Grave Room and Steel Garrote endings. The rebels should be okay under the Living Lands ending as the Empire isn't there to scare them off, but they still fear you, and retreat deep into the wilderness. These same slides are also the same if you made Yigwolf confess. If you spared them, then it's a little bit different. Under Adir, the Grave Room, and the Steel Garrote, they are thankful you spared them, but with the Empire ruling over Paradise, they're still hiding in the shadows. With the Empire gone and the Living Lands unified, however, the rebels are free to walk their town. They use their skills and secrets to help the people, and for once, these rebels have a promising future. For Fior, their endings are quite consistent. If you chose Thirdborn for the refugees, they managed to find common ground with the people of the village. If it was Paradise, then the refugees are initially unwelcome by the general population, but their knowledge of agriculture was valued enough to where they were able to have a steady relationship. Then comes the state of Fior as a town. If you didn't stamp out the Steel Garrote, then the place is too burned to be habitable, defaulting to an ending where the people of Fior stay wherever you sent them. If you did find them, then the people of Fior will eventually come back to the town, but their future depends on the previous endings. If they return, but the Living Lands are under Adir's control, they are forced to stop their research into animancy, forcing them to conduct it in secret. If it was a grave room, the Empire disapproves of the research, but they are allowed to work. Progress is slow, but it's still progress. A unified Living Lands is the best for Fior, as it allows them to work on the animancy unfettered, advancing their developments tenfold. To cap it off, if you happen to sell your future corpse to Elia, then a slide will appear, showing that you are ruminating on the idea of being a future revenant for a farmhand. As for Shatterscarp, let's start with Ringrim's decision where numerous people died under her spell. If the Living Lands is under Adir's control, it seems like tensions are quite high between Thirdborn and Adir. Older folks know that power fluctuates, so it's only a matter of time until the Adiran Empire loses its grip, but those of the younger generation want their land back. As it's said, it's like a powder keg that sits and waits. Under a grave room, Thirdborn is still initially untrustworthy of Adir, but their numerous ships stocked full of goods provide enough trade to keep the Thirdborn in good spirits. With the Living Lands free of the Empire's control, many of those from Shatterscarp and Thirdborn mourn the loss of their people and venture out into the wilds on their own, leaving the town and its people behind. If you sided with Ludwin, then things are a little bit different. Under the Empire's control, the people of Thirdborn are stuck between the Empire on one side and the Dream Thralls on the other, so most decide to leave the land and find somewhere else to live. With a grave room, the Empire sends forces to Thirdborn to help stop the Dream Thralls that still pollute the land. For a time, there is peace between the groups, but Thirdborn wonders what will happen when their common enemy is defeated. Will the Empire point their cannons at them next? Without their control, Thirdborn is forced to take down the Dream Thralls on their own. It eventually became a part of their daily life. People and kids even make games out of it. It's unclear though if they will ever kill them all. Next up are the Tusks and Soulless Keep. Let's start with Mahala. Under the Empire, there is an initial feeling of peace, but over time the demands of the Empire become too much, and Mahala is forced to shut themselves off from the island again. This ended up sparking a war between the two groups, with no current winner as of yet. Under a grave room, Mahala's reluctance to work with the Empire brings a heavy cost to the dwarven people. They are less favored in trade negotiations and always get supplies last, but they do get them, and the people are happier for it. With a united Living Lands free of Empire control, Mahala sticks to her guns and locks the keep away. But after grieving for her friend Kostia, she ends up honoring his wish and opening the doors up. Trade ends up going well, and many, although not all citizens, are happy to greet their new allies. As for Kostia, under the Empire, his people spread out. Some people found new settlements and old fortresses, and others worked under the Empire. Kostia himself negotiates better rights for his people. With a grave room established, the dwarves also spread out. They were accepted by many people across the Living Lands, but thanks to their isolation, they have fewer allies than he realized. The Empire also asks far more of the grave room than Kostia expects. Essentially, they have him backed into a corner. Without their hold over the land, the dwarves, as you'd expect, also spread out. Like with the other endings, some rebuild old settlements, others find new places to live. Kostia spends his days establishing trade routes for his people. It's a hard life, but they are successful. If you chose the third ending, which was killing Kostia but still upholding his plan, then Mahala is forced to lead her people outside the keep. Both losses hit her especially hard as she struggles to face her people, but the dwarves rally around her and work together to build a new settlement from the ruins of the old. It takes some time, but she manages to work up the courage to be a leader for her people again, and soon they'll be ready to open their new doors to the world once more. Next up is the companions. If he didn't complete Kai's quest, then he finds himself lost. He wants to chat and celebrate with those after a fight, but he feels like something is missing. He wants to enjoy being in the company of those around him, but he can't. So he packs what little he has, and he leaves the living lands. Through the envoy's help, however, he takes his life in a different direction depending on what you said to him at Tama's grave. These options include leaving the living lands and returning to Rauatai, fully committed to peace for his people, both for those here in Rauatai and those he left behind in the living lands. He also joins the Ranganui Council to help push this idea of his forward. He could also return to Thirdborn, help repair its walls and train its fighters and carry on Tama's legacy. Or he ends up becoming a traveler, traveling the lands of Eora just to see what's out there, chasing the joy and beauty that the world plans to offer him. There's also a unique end slide that occurs if you choose to romance Kai. Avowed notably doesn't have any traditional romance choices, but if after completing his quest, if you confess your love to him, he will say that after all this is said and over, if you're still interested, then sure. Which rewards you with an ending where Kai and the envoy are together, and he seems to be the only companion in the party where this kind of romance is possible. For Marius, now that his job as a guide is done, he goes back to what he was doing before. However, his journey with the party has encouraged him to re-enter society and live amongst the people again. He establishes a trade route between Paradise and Thirdborn, and guides travelers between them for money, while sharing stories of the envoy with those who will listen. Having learned of his past that haunted him though, he also gains the courage to re-enter society, now that his anxieties of the unknown have been quelled. But this time he acts as an ambassador between his people in Solus and the people of Thirdborn. If the keep was destroyed, he can't very well be the ambassador of it, so if that happens, he doesn't get the chance to reconcile with his people, and so his connection to the dwarfs is lost. As for Giada and Yatsli, their future depends on the decision you make for them. If Giada was encouraged to continue animancy, she would pursue this career and work to understand the spiritual health of the living lands. Many people follow her example and look up to her, and eventually a rumor spreads of some animancers working in harmony with nature. If you encourage her to give up animancy, she starts learning new skills. She's a jack of all trades and a master of none, but she finds a comforting peace in that she never got as an animancer. There is also a secret third option that requires you not to speak to Giada. If you never gave her your opinion on what she is to do with her life, then the end slide explains that she's basically right where you left her, stuck between two paths, unable to take the first step. It seems like she's still focused on completing her family's work, but it's unclear if she ever will. And finally, for Yatsli, if you told her to stay in Fior, she'll help the Animancers rebuild after the attack. She continues to pursue both her interests in magic and the godless, but she feels like something is missing from her life. Under the teachings of Ringram, Yatsli becomes an extremely talented mage, but she visits Quilichi less and less as time goes on, with only warm letters to keep her company. As the librarian of the godless, she upholds the oath that her prior incarnation started. She spends the days in the library sifting through the tablets and papers, cataloging everything she can, but over time she starts to feel incredibly lonely, and rarely goes out to see Quilichi anymore. After all these endings is a brief one with Sapadal. Now free from prison, they ask the envoy many questions about life, and they're happy to answer them. They also offer to help the kith of the living lands. The rage that once consumed them is gone, and another calamity is unlikely to happen. Their grief and pain have been transformed into love. Sapadal also continues to play the role of a voice in the envoy's mind, but they don't mind the company. If Sapadal was killed, then the envoy finds themselves feeling a sense of freedom that Sapadal never got. If you kneeled and were subsequently executed, the Steel Garrote won, and the envoy died with honor. They also make sure that anything resembling Sapadal was stamped out and destroyed. This is similar to if you took over the Steel Garrote from Ludwin. All worship of any god but Wotica is banned, even Sapadal, and the Steel Garrote works to break the frontier of the living lands. Everything afterward is practically identical to the Adir Empire endings, even down to the specific changes in the towns and cities, with the only difference being you at the head of the Steel Garrote. Along with this is an end slide dedicated to a side quest. In Paradise, you could find a quest that required you to investigate a missing expedition team. This turned into a much larger quest than you'd ever expect it to, where you meet the godlike Sargamus, who is a servant to the god Aethys. He's trying to summon Aethys into this statue so that he could pay for the horrors that he caused the people of the Deadfire. You have the option of killing him because you'll learn that the relic he needs to power the statue was powered through the use of the expedition team, who's found dead in a back room. But you can also follow through with the plan. It won't work no matter what you do, but you have some options that point him where to go next. You could tell him to step into the device that sucks out a person's soul, believing him to be the missing link, but that doesn't work either, same as if you stepped into it. You can, however, tell Sargamus to either act as a healer and listener to those of the living lands, listening to their needs and wants, go to Deadfire to help those affected by Aethys, or find the other godlikes that survived their callings back to their gods. During this talk with him, Sapadal will also request that you put them in the statue instead. If you do, then their essence goes into it, and they can freely walk the land in their body, assuming of course you didn't kill them. When talking with Sapodal, you can ask many times what they even plan to do once they're freed. They say that they want to be present, feel the water beneath their feet, the sand through their fingers, the wind on their face. This gives them a chance to do just that. Afterwards, we see the final slide. All the companions are gathered together, sharing stories, reminiscing, and living in the moment. But for you, you make sure to savor this moment, because very soon, the world you know is about to change because of your choices. Thus bringing us to the end of Avowed. Thank you all for watching today, and I hope you enjoyed. As always, like the video if you enjoy, and subscribe if you're new. Check out the channel for more story content, and the Patreon if you want to support me further. Huge thanks especially to my returning viewers for coming back to another video, and the patrons who continue to support the work I do. Take care everyone, goodbye.